Hey guys, welcome to World History class. Once again, it's Mr. Morefield, and we're looking at the second video of ancient Greece concerning the city-states, that is the Greek polis. Stay tuned to figure out exactly what those are, what each of them entails, as well as Athens and Sparta, and specifically the types of governments that each one of those has, specifically Athens and their democracy. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a citizen? Well, stay tuned in this video. You will find out exactly what it would have been like to have been a citizen 2,500 years ago in ancient Athens. Here we go. Hey guys, so in order to understand the history of the Greek polis, the city-states, you have to go back in time a little bit. So let's go back to the Mycenaean civilization time period, and let's look at these guys. So if you remember, it was around 2100 BC that we began seeing the Mycenaean civilization rising up. And so by the 1400s, the Mycenaeans were flourishing. In fact, the Minoans had fallen, and it sort of left a gap, I suppose you might say, a void. And so the Mycenaeans were able to step in, and they expanded their empire during this time. But it wasn't very long at all till the Mycenaeans declined. They fell into decline, and therefore the Greeks as a whole fell into decline. And it was during this time also, between 1200 and 750 BC, that there was no writing. You say, well, Mr. Morefield, that's a good thing, right? No writing is a good thing. We don't like to write, and so, no, actually it's a really bad thing. It's a bad thing because all we have left of that time period, 1200 to 750 BC of the Greeks, are archaeological digs and finds. And so the things they've unearthed tell us about the Greeks during that time period, but we don't have any written records. And so the historians, the archaeologists, termed this time period as the Dark Age of Greece. And so during this Dark Age of Greece, it was not only a time of no writing, but also a time period when Greece declined in terms of food surplus and trade. They weren't trading like they used to do. And so it was really a time period of darkness, you might say, instead of light. But it wasn't long until farming revived, trade began to revive, and also writing began to flourish again. It was because of those Phoenicians and their amazing alphabet that writing in Greece revived. Yay, we have writing again. And so we find during that time period more written records. It was the rise of the city-states. And so it was during this time that Greek city-states began popping up all over the place. Now remember, their mountains, their geography caused them to be a particular people that were separated from other people here, and they didn't communicate, and so they would have different cultures and different lifestyles and different religions, and they had the same language. They all spoke Greek. Isn't that awesome? But they were just different in terms of these people didn't tell these people what to do, and these people didn't tell these people what to do, these groups of Greeks. And so they became very independent of one another, and so that gave rise to Greek city-states, the Greek polis. And so let's go talk about the Greek polis. So these Greek city-states are independent. They are doing their own thing because of the rugged, rocky terrain and non-communication of being isolated. They're called polis. Polis. That is the Greek term for city-state. You will need to know that. I can assure you that you need to know that. Remember that polis equals city-state, right? Well, the city-states were very interesting in how they were made up. They didn't have a lot of spaces spread out, so everything was kind of, right there on top of one another. And there were parts of it, it was like going downtown. Let's take a look at these. Most city-states were similar in design, though they were not very large due to the lack of space. The mountains and the seas, you see, limited this. Most poli, city-states, had a hill where they could resort in case of attack. And really that's what the Acropolis started out being. It was a fortified area where people could resort to in order to defend attacks. But over time it became more than that. In fact, the Greeks would begin to put temples and altars. These temples and altars were erected at the top of the hills to honor and worship the many Greek gods and goddesses that they had. And you can imagine why they would put them on top, closer to the gods. They're higher up. People can see them, that sort of thing. They're exalted is the idea. This area is called an acropolis. Now, just below the Acropolis was the Agora, the Agora. Now, we would consider this part of the city downtown. It's like going downtown. So if you can imagine somebody saying, let's go downtown, here are the things you're going to find in the Agora. The Agora is where people, men really, came to discuss the politics and issues of the day. It contained public buildings. It is where people would come to buy and sell and trade things. And so you have a market, you have a place of debate, and you have a temple. Again, the temple being a place where they would honor the gods, where they would go and worship, that sort of thing. Now, they would also come to the Agora to compete in athletics or to be entertained. Do you go downtown to be entertained by anything? Do you go downtown to eat at restaurants or to talk with people or to meet with people? Certainly it's different, but the Agora is very similar to our going downtown to a market or a place to worship or that sort of thing, okay? And of course you had the farmland that was usually on the outside of the city gates. This particular city-state photo here doesn't have a wall around it, but they would develop walls. And outside of the city walls normally would be the farmland. Now, two examples of these city-states are Athens and Sparta. We are Sparta. We make our own decisions. And we are Athens. We do things our own way. We have our own culture and that sort of thing. And so this will give you an idea. There were many more city-states than these, but these are the two city-states you definitely need to know about for this class, as well as they stand for what the ideas of Greece with different governments and so on. Sparta, of course, having an oligarchy most of the time, and Athens would eventually create what we call democracy. Again, these two city-states are examples of what the other city-states would be like, but Athens was the largest one according to historians and archaeologists. Now, specifically speaking about Athens, who were the people who were coming down to the Agora to discuss things and to buy and sell and trade and worship and having those rights? Well, those are called citizens. Citizenship was a concept that was really invented in Greece. Never before had people been able to have rights like they had in Athens. These landowners who were male, not female or slaves, but they possessed these kinds of rights where they were loyal to their government and their government would take care of them, of course. They could vote on laws. Male landowners, when this first began, males could come and they could actually take part in their own government. They could vote. But over time, that evolved into a little more progressing of democracy. And it would not just be landowners, but it would be all males who were citizens inside of Athens, the city-state, that they could actually vote themselves. Again, not slaves or women. That's not my law. That's history, of course. That's the Athenians. You have to blame it on them. But males could come and they could take part in their own government, which was very unique to anything that had ever been before. Now, in contrast to the people who were simply subjects to the monarchs of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the emperors of China, male citizens of Greece had certain rights and privileges, and they contributed to their government, and the government protected them. Now, over time, the city-state of Athens developed this unique system of government, which we term today as a direct democracy. Direct democracy. Now, around 500 BC, there was a man by the name of Cleisthenes in ancient Athens, who sought to give political power to everyone, to all its citizens, both upper and lower classes, except for servants, slaves that is, and females. Only males could vote. Now, they didn't have to own land, however. Again, that's not my rule. That's in history. That's ancient Athens. Blame it on Cleisthenes. Now, Cleisthenes is considered the father of democracy. He is the father of democracy. And so we give credit to him. We give credit to the Greeks then for laying down that foundation on which even our system of government is based to this very day in the United States. Democracy is not the only form of government that came out of the Greek city-states. There were other forms of government as well, including the monarchy that we've discussed before, when you have one supreme ruler that is a king or queen. Also, an oligarchy. Sparta was for a time an oligarchy where you have rule by the few, that is, wealthy landowners who were normally aristocrats. Google aristocrats, aristocracy. And then you have tyranny. a tyranny. Someone takes power illegally in some way or another. Sometimes the people liked it, sometimes they didn't. Usually it was from a citizen of the country who would rise up and take over according to how the citizens would like for them to do that. Usually a non-royal birth. They were not in that line of next generation kings. So what do we have then? What kind of governments do we have that came out of the ancient Greek city-states, the polis? Well, you have the monarchy, which is ruled by one ruler, a king or queen. You have ruled by a few. That's an oligarchy, okay, that Sparta had. And then you have a tyranny, which is someone takes power illegally, non-royal birth. And then, of course, you have that democracy idea that came out of ancient Athens. You will need to know all of those for this class. All right, guys, I want to leave you with one last thing concerning the governments of Greece, and that is, what is the main difference in democracy and all of the other types of government? Well, let's listen to Pericles tell us. Now, who in the world was Pericles? Well, it was Pericles who was the product of an election. In other words, he was voted in. It was because of democracy that he was able to be a leader, and the people wanted him to be their leader. That is one difference that made Athenian government different than anyone else. And so it was about 460 BC that he became the leader of Athens. And the city-state of Athens really reached its zenith under this man named Pericles. So as he encouraged the people to be involved in their government, so they were. And Greek government flourished during this time. The city-state of Athens really reached its zenith under this man named Pericles as he encouraged the people to be involved in their government. And that's really what makes Athenian democracy different than any other types of government, is that the people are involved. The people have a say in the government. Pericles once said, "Our form of government does not enter into rivalry with the institutions of others. We do not copy our neighbors, but are an example to them. It is true that we are called a democracy, for the administration is in the hands of the many and not the few." And so certainly you can see the difference in Athenian democracy than all of the forms of government. The people have a say in their own government. You know, today, many parts of the world have democracy as their basis. The United States is a republic, but our basis is in that democracy, and that is that people have a say in their government. We'll talk about what a representative democracy / republic is in another video. But it is in the United States of America where we are able to vote for representatives, to send to vote on laws for us. So what are the essential items you need to know from this video? Number one, what happened to Greece after the fall of the Mycenaeans? Number two, what was the role of the citizen in ancient Greece? And number three, who is considered the father of democracy? If you understand the answers to these questions, you have a general sense of what this lesson has been about. Did you know that around 330 BC, a group known as the Macedonians came in and invaded Greece, in fact, invading Athens and taking over? But that would not do away with the influences that democracy had on the world. And in fact, even to this very day, the way of modern democracy is still very much alive in our world. And so thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope you learned something about the Greeks, the ancient Greeks and their city-states, their polis, and the forms of government that came out of them, especially the Athenian democracy. And as Frederick Douglass once said, where there's no struggle, there's no progress. Until next time, happy learning.